Hey, it's Toulouse and Kat. This is Beyond What's Said, where we uncover the hidden dynamics behind communication, confidence, and how we connect with each other.
Today we're talking about anxiety. Now, you might think anxiety. We're going to learn about calming down nerves. Nope. Today we're going to learn about how anxiety is connected to our relationship with failure. So while we can rehearse, practice, and things never really go as planned, the more we accept that, the more freedom we gain in presenting what matters most.
Make sure you like and subscribe and download our episode. Let's get right into it.
Let's get into it. You know, I've noticed that so much of like the really high stakes moments or high pressure moments that I've experienced both recently and maybe a little while ago, it's interesting. What I'm really afraid of is the aftermath. Just like when the thing happens, it's just going to feel like this is probably what death feels like you're dead and you're.
Well, it's more like they already have the bow and arrows pointed at you. They have the SWAT team on every corner. They have the laser thing on you. It does kind of feel like that, when you're really nervous. And it's funny because it's not even like when you're in the moment. A lot of the anxiety actually happens well before you actually step on the proverbial stage.
Yeah, exactly.
When you're on stage, you actually don't feel that much. Like everything becomes a blur.
It's sort of a disassociation, almost like out-of-body experience for me. But I remember when I was interviewing for university jobs, it was the thought of the rejection email, which I did get on every occasion. I'm not dead. But I remember the thought of the rejection email. It almost felt like, well, this is, I'm going to be on my deathbed. And that's more or less the same feeling, right? But then you get there and it's like, okay, wow, calm down. Like, obviously, this is not to downplay. There are people that like go through things where they literally have a brush with death or they encounter something that is genuinely deeply traumatizing and awful. But even for the little things, which is often what this podcast is all about, that feeling just shows up and you're like, how am I going to live after? It's almost like that Michael Bolton song, tell me, how am I supposed to live without you? But it's more like,
I don't know the lyrics.
How am I supposed to live after this really embarrassing moment?
Well, it's like, it's really interesting because you mentioned there are real moments when there are real stakes and the anxiety should kick in. But I think like more and more we kind of broad stroke all things as equal weight in anxiety. And that's kind of what we want to address today, which is how do you kind of acknowledge like, okay, let's reserve the really high stakes moments and reserve that kind of fight or flight, that kind of really scary and spiraling anxiety feeling for things that really matter.
Yeah.
But how do you compartmentalize other ones that are like, okay, I'm not going to die. There's no skin off my back. At most, it's maybe I feel uncomfortable or a bit embarrassed.
Yes.
And that's not a life or death situation.
Correct.
So to learn to be able to distinguish the difference will help us to become stronger people, but also just better mentally, like emotionally, all that stuff.
No, absolutely. I've lately been revisiting the work of Dr. Ellis, the founder of Rational Emotive Behavior Therapy, which is a really great framework, obviously for actual clinical therapy purposes, but in order to, deal with anxiety and think about these questions, right? I found his work really, really helpful. And he talks about anxiety as, fundamentally, anxiety is this adversity, right? You're facing something, you're unsure about the outcomes, and you want to control. You want to master what's about to happen, but obviously there's a lot of things that are getting in your way, and so you're anxious. You feel that insecurity, that unease, like my life is at risk, I'm being threatened. And Dr. Ellis talks about the genuine, real anxiety that we need to confront as biological organisms that evolve to detect threats and danger in our environment at all times. So anxiety is a sort of a natural built-in response.
Yeah.
But so much of the response, at least in the modern world that we live in, so much of those responses are kind of oriented towards things that actually aren't a genuine physical or mental threat to the integrity of the human mind and body, right?
Yeah.
So it really is about figuring out how to compartmentalize, how to reframe. We've talked a lot about
Mm.
this on this podcast, how to reframe the dangers that we think are dangerous, the mistakes we deem to be embarrassing and fatal and awful. It's just about like repackaging them as, well, wait a minute. Uh, my survival isn't at stake here.
Hmm.
And if anything, I need to fail. I need to kind of experience this in order to grow, but
Yeah.
in order to have like just a healthier relationship with reality, because
And
so
just to
much of
live a
reality is failure.
And just to live like a happier life, because it's
Absolutely.
like you talk about way back when anxiety, all these kind of survival responses were necessary once upon a time. Back in the time when our ancestors were threatened,
Yeah.
if we don't trigger these kind of flight or flight,
Flight or
we
flight.
fly and then we fly again.
Just fly.
We just keep
Just fly. Don't fight. Just fly. Flight or flight. Flight and flight. Yeah, no, of course. And I mean, it conjures up images here of very primitive ancient human communities having to collectively hunt down like woolly mammoths
Yeah.
and saber-toothed
But
tigers.
that's the thing is that you trigger that, you combat or you flee, and
Mm,
then now you are, there's a particular result or response that creates this kind of data. Be like, all
mm,
right, this is what I need to do.
exactly.
But when you take that same kind of instinct and then you
Mm,
plunk it into the modern world
sure.
where we don't have saber tooth, chasing us. I mean, maybe we get chased by like a snake or like a cockroach.
I mean, here in Guangzhou, I mean, where I work, I could literally encounter cobra-like venomous
That's
thing.
true. Right.
But no, but by and large, you don't have to worry about these
Exactly, but
threats.
then when you keep triggering it at such high stakes levels,
Mm,
the kind of feedback that, like what kind of impact would that do to you?
yeah,
It's like that just trains your brain that you're perpetually surrounded by threats.
correct. Exactly. And I think, I don't want to say that like our ancient ancestors were only focused on physical, animalistic threats in the form of mammoths and saber-toothed tigers or Neanderthals when we kind of
Well,
cohabitated with them.
it's also threats of like, not being able to eat.
And the threat of social rejection. Remember,
That
the
too,
earliest
yeah.
human beings, we had to find ways to survive as close knit communities, pooling resources and knowledge together
That's right.
for hunting and foraging and gathering. And then early agricultural societies were having to figure out how to divide up labor and organize things so that the harvest is going to be consistent enough
Mhm.
for us to survive as a group of a few thousands. And obviously, this be a different podcast if we got into the specifics of where we go from agricultural societies
Of
and
course.
and so on. But no, I think that we have these, like you said, these responses, these survival responses that are built into us, and it's perfectly normal to overdo it with the threat detection,
Mm,
to think that everything around you is a sort of a dire existential arrow pointed at you, the
mm,
target. But I think this is where the work of Dr. Ellis and REBT is fascinating because
yeah.
he breaks it down into A, B, C, D. And it's quite convenient for our purposes, right? A is adversity. Something happens.
Mhm.
That's the threat.
Yeah.
And it could be anything from a very venomous insect in the jungle to a public speaking role that you need to undertake. Then the problem is we tend to jump straight to C, consequence.
Mm,
There's just incessant worrying about the outcomes, like this thing is going to kill me, or I will face shame and embarrassment and ostracization. People are going to cast me out because I didn't do the thing right.
yeah.
But what's crucial is the B. The B is the intervening thing. It's the pivotal factor in controlling the anxiety. It's
Mm,
belief.
mm,
What you tell yourself about the relationship between A and C is critical.
yeah.
It's like, okay, this is a possible outcome, but is it the only outcome?
Mm,
And how will I handle that outcome? Right. So that's kind of the formula that REBT is all about. And even though it's been widely applied in everything from pop self-help stuff to actual clinical therapies, I think for our purposes, when it comes to public speaking, communication, it's a massively beneficial framework
Yeah.
because it allows you to have this very healthy relationship with failure. To
Hmm.
be like, hey, you know what? I'm not going to die. It's gonna be kind of crappy and shitty in the moment when I feel judged or people are laughing at me or whatever. But ultimately, I need to kind of go through this in order to, do those risk taking moves where I practice a different kind of script, I take a different approach in an interview, or I decide to, just try something new. Like, how else are we supposed to do anything that is innovative and growth oriented
Mm.
as people wanting to improve our communication game if we don't accept that we will fail?
Well, we always have been told that you need
Mm,
to allow yourself to fail in order to learn from your mistakes, and that's the fastest way to grow.
sure.
We all know this. But I will be the first to say I don't like that feeling. I
Mm,
don't want to fail. I want everything to be a success and everything to be nothing but praises and sunshine and rainbows.
yeah.
Because I
No, of
don't like
course.
the feeling of embarrassment and to look bad in
Yeah.
front of my peers, in front of strangers, in front of a large crowd, etc., right? Then I think that the REBT framework then becomes really useful because it helps pull us out of that kind of reactive
Mm,
reflexes
yeah.
of like if I do bad, consequence, I'm gonna be chastised and shamed, and
Mm,
therefore I'm just freaking out, right?
yeah.
This kind of gives you that ability to go, okay, I'm in the R phase right now. I'm worried that if I miss a word, if I slip up, if I don't get this job, then the consequence is going to be shame, doubt, failure, etc., etc.
Mm,
Then this B becomes this bridge.
yeah.
I know it's belief,
Mm,
but you can also see it as I'm at A and the consequence is C. Before it was just these two things going on,
yeah.
I see B, belief, as this bridge to assess and go,
Mm,
hey, am I going to be okay if I cross this?
yeah.
And then you start building belief in the path that's in front of you,
Yeah.
but as well as belief in yourself
Yeah.
so that you have the willingness to take that risk
Yeah.
because you know that you're not going to die.
No, and I think that the belief in the self is critical, because so much of this REBT framework is also premised on just unconditional acceptance of yourself. Because if you start with a conditional acceptance or you have terms that you want to meet, then you're kind of creating a standard. And if you don't live up to that standard, well, then you're screwed.
Mm,
So the B part is really interesting. So Dr. Ellis, he was really big on the words must or should. He
mm.
said these words, you need to kind of excommunicate them from your thoughts.
Speaking of excommunicating.
But basically, and he had a really funny term for it. He called it masturbation. And he said,
I
"Man, see,
get it.
there we
I
go,
get
get
it.
it." So he said, the second you start thinking in terms like I must do this. I mean, should isn't as strong, but let's just go to must. I must do it this way or else, or things must be as I want them to be,
Mm,
right? So instead, he first advocated that we see ourselves as having fundamental inherent value, full stop.
yeah.
And then it's like, okay, I want this interview or presentation gig or this
Or even
other,
like a date.
like a date. I want this opportunity that's being given to me to go exactly as I want it to go.
Hmm.
It would be preferable that it went really well. But even if it doesn't, you're not going to fall apart and there's going to be room to learn.
Mm,
You will still live a happy, fulfilling life.
yep.
And even if we're talking about something fairly cataclysmic, like the loss of a job
Hmm.
or the loss of a relationship,
Yep.
there are still ways in which you can find meaning and joy in other things. You'll discover a different purpose. You'll discover a different role.
That's right.
So to masturbate, right?
Mm,
To stew in these negative thoughts about yourself
yeah.
and how unworthy you are, and to attach a lot of things must be this or must be that in your self talk
Mm,
is to make that irrational leap from A to C.
yeah.
The rational leap from A to C is to always assume you have value
Hmm.
and always take stock of the fact that though this would be nice and preferable, I can't control this, but I can control how I react to it, how I handle the setback should the setback occur.
Yeah. You had said, Dr. Ellis said, it always starts with you knowing what your value is. And
Mm,
I think like that is also another thing that a lot of people are not really aware of,
yeah,
or they haven't really took the time to really think about what inherently is my core value
yeah,
in order to even get to the REBT
yeah,
kind of framework. And that's something that we will explore in the next episode, I
yeah,
believe, talking about the value forward framework. But yeah, like without knowing what your value is, without that being your starting point and anchoring point,
mm,
it's really hard to believe,
yeah,
be in yourself that the C is not going to be dire,
yeah, exactly.
and then causing this kind of like negative feedback
Yeah.
and downward spiral
And
situation.
he went even further. This is where the D comes in, disputation, to
Mm,
dispute your irrational beliefs. So
mm,
REBT is really one of these therapies that was all about like self criticism, not of yourself like inherently, but criticism of all of your irrational thoughts and beliefs and see how maladaptive they are and how
mm,
you're not coping with reality in a healthy way.
yeah.
And the D part is really interesting. So say you absolutely want success in a job interview,
Mm,
right? So it'd be preferable that I do really well in this job interview. Why? Well, because this job is really important. Yeah, but is it the only job you'll
yeah,
ever get? Is it the
exactly.
only opportunity you'll ever get?
Well, you talk about the must and should. When we
Mm,
use those terms, it narrows our scope to a very boxed in view
mm,
of things. So when you say, like, I must get this job or I must achieve this thing
mm,
or else,
yeah,
you're blindsiding yourself to all the other opportunities.
yeah,
And then it does become there's only one job or this one person that you must ask out on a date or
hmm,
like pursue.
yeah,
Um, it really does then limit you
it
in a
does.
way. But when you remove the must, when you stop masturbating, you
Masturbating. I love
know,
that term.
then you can then be open to seeing
Mm,
more opportunities. And you might go, hey, maybe that thing that I was so fixated on
yeah.
really wasn't that suitable in the end. I don't know why. It's like there was that time when I was like really focused on this one guy, like it's in high school. I know he doesn't like it when I talk
I hate
about
these
guys,
stories.
but I like talking about them. Like in high school, you'll crush on someone, right? You
Mm,
really like someone. You think that, oh my goodness, this person will be perfect for me. You fantasize and you almost like kind of make it larger than life, like in a
mm,
beautiful way, because
yeah,
you got rose colored glasses on. And then you think how perfect that this person would be. You start interpreting every single interaction or non-interaction, or even
mm,
just like a look or like whatever. You
mm,
start interpreting everything. And then you put yourself in this like the purview becomes smaller and smaller and
yeah,
smaller. You're just so one track on this person. And then you're like, all right, finally, I'm gonna go and pursue, like as girls, we pursue as well. We're like, hey, um, by the way, for the record, I asked him out just so that it lives there forever.
the field of view was so narrow, she missed out on. I mean, no, she eventually
No,
did. She
I
eventually did,
no, no,
not
no.
miss out on this.
I did, I asked you out, but so it's like you pursue the person, and then maybe the person kind of gives you the cold shoulder, or
Mm,
gives you kind of that awkward, like, yeah,
mm,
maybe no, or worse, they embarrass you. They
mhm,
start telling their friends, and you feel completely just
mm,
demoralized and traumatized from the entire experience. But then after all of that calms down, I remember I would think back, why was I so obsessed with that person?
mm,
Like, that person wasn't really all that suitable for
yeah,
me anyway.
mm,
And so that's like a power of like when you decouple the must and the should, it opens your purview up again.
yeah, it
It's almost
does.
like you come back up to the surface of water and you can see better.
And it's, much like a teacher who is concerned about the extent to which students are engaged or really into a lesson, not realizing that there's maybe one or two students that are actually getting so much value out of whatever it is that's going on at the front of the class, but you're so fixated on the larger audience, right?
Mm,
Or you go through different public speaking gigs and you're sort of mortified at the presence of a handful of people yawning or
Yeah.
seemingly dozing off, right? So ultimately, it's negativity bias. We're
Yeah.
going to scan and find all of these negative, threatening things in our field of vision. But that's the thing. If you have that masturbating, I guess, but if you're constantly kind of musting for things to go exactly your way, you're
Mhm.
missing out on a vast range of possibilities and opportunities and really healthy reframes.
And I can't tell you how many times I have like we talked about in another episode. I'm
Mm,
a Taurus. I'm very
mm,
stubborn. It's almost just like I see a target and like a bull, I will charge at it
yeah,
until otherwise something else gets my
yeah,
attention, wrecking everything along the way.
mm,
And so I can't tell you how many times I have literally like fixed my eyes on a particular bullseye. And whether it's a job or a role or a relationship or whatever it is,
mm,
and I would just go for it. And then I would ignore all the signs that's like telling me like, "Hey, not a good idea. Hey, this is better."
yeah,
And I'll be like, "No, no, 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 no." Until all the doors start slamming in my face. And,
yeah,
and no matter how hard I try, it's not working out. I'm
yeah,
just not getting that job or the recognition or whatever it is,
yeah,
the lasting relationship that I finally found. Um, but it's like, yeah, I was fixated on my purview because I was focusing so much on I must get this in order to be successful,
yes,
or I should do this
mm,
because that's what's going to bring me ultimate happiness or contentment. But then when I finally take a moment to stop and look around at the ruins, then I go, "Oh, turns out there was this other door."
mm,
And then I would try this other thing. I would start thinking about, oh, what are the other possibilities since all of this is like, a dead end? Those are the only moments when I actually think, what are my other options? And I can't tell you how many times that the other options have always
mm,
turned out to be bigger and better
yeah.
and brought me to where I need to be.
Yeah. It's a weird double-edged sword because in the moment, we're driven by these thoughts of anxiety and fear of negative outcomes. And that motivates us and energizes us. And perhaps it allows us to have that sharp focus and that determination.
Mm,
But yeah, then there's a time where you fail or things don't work out the way you want them to work out. And now you kind of look back and you're like, wow, there was a wealth of other things happening behind me.
yeah.
But again, it's, call it faith, call it destiny. Sometimes I think we are meant to toil away at something and fail miserably
Hmm.
only for it to ultimately teach us that, hey, this is the moment where you have all these other things now you can actually dive
Well, I
headfirst
think
into.
like you just made a really good point is that we can't avoid failure.
We can't avoid fit. No.
You can try your best, but ultimately it's more just like now or later
Mm,
kind of thing. And
yeah.
because it's not so that we're destined to fail,
Yeah.
it's that we're destined to learn.
We're destined to, yeah, that's actually a really good way to put it. We're destined to learn. And sometimes, though, the learning maybe takes a little bit longer than it needs to. When we're not, I'm not looking at you
I'm
particularly
like,
here.
You're
Uh,
looking at me."
yeah. But it's like, for me, I spent 10 plus years of my life trying to become one thing. And I didn't become that thing, but instead, along the way, I picked up a wealth of skill sets, anything from teaching to obviously performing a variety of different roles. And now I'm really thankful that I recognized that I needed to walk away from one opportunity to take on all these other opportunities that were offered to me. But, along the way, it was tough. It felt like I was walking away from something that was critical to my identity that like defined me for so long. Even then, I still felt like I was betraying a part of myself. I was walking away from something I'd worked so hard, letting others down. So it takes a while. It takes a
Yeah.
while to actually learn. And I think that there's a lot of great content out there when it comes to communication that teaches us how to hack public speaking, how
Mm.
to calm your nerves, how to regulate yourself, your body language, like conversation structures you can follow. But you got to be ready and willing to soak in all that shame
Yeah.
and all that embarrassment and try things fail and fail again and again and again and eventually like realize, oh, okay, well, now I'm kind of getting somewhere.
Yeah,
Right?
exactly. And it's like, so going back to the REBT, starting with the point of self belief, knowing
Yeah.
that, hey, I'm not failing all this or be embarrassing myself or not,
Yeah.
is that with each time, the consequence might be uncomfortable, but what also comes with it are the benefits of growth
Yeah.
and us evolving as a person to become more resilient, to become wiser and more experienced. And so, quite frankly, earlier I said like we're destined to learn.
Destined to
It
learn. Yeah.
really is more like we're destined to evolve.
Yeah. We're destined to evolve, to change our ways. And it's just that we do it sometimes a lot sooner, sometimes a lot later.
Mm.
And that's interesting. At what point, you talked about the door kind of slamming shut. Imagine you're trying to push a door open, like how big or how intense is the resistance?
Well, it's kind of like that Ryan Holiday's book, Obstacle is the
Yeah,
Way.
the obstacle is the way. Yeah.
It's a great book that talks
Wonderful book.
about
Yeah.
literally this. It's like we need to face adversity. We need
Mm,
to sit in those uncomfortable feelings and to see how we can overcome
yeah.
that. And so that the act of overcoming or the figuring out how to overcome is precisely that bridge to get through
Yeah.
that B part because you're developing belief and you're developing the capacity to be like, hey,
Mm,
I know for a fact that I've overcome that before. I
mm,
have the ability to do it again. That creates belief. I know that it didn't kill me before,
yeah.
and I'm pretty sure I'm going to come out fine this
Yeah.
time. So, belief in the path that you're choosing to go down.
Exactly.
Now, the question becomes when does the obstacle not become the way?
Yeah. And that was a critical part of his book where he talks about how there is a moment where, all right, now it's an obstacle and you need to kind of go around it, or you need to kind of find a way to walk away from hardship, because there is a time where hardship, I think, it's obvious that it's actually getting in the way of growth.
Hmm.
It's undermining your capacity to move forward. I don't know, it's a very tough one
Well,
to.
I think you talked about when the doors keep closing on you for getting an academic job. You
Mm,
walking away felt like you're abandoning a big part of you that you have
yeah,
invested so much.
that's true.
And so we never take light or like speak lightly about these experiences.
Mm,
It does feel like a part of you died. And that,
yeah,
choosing to walk away from that is, you feel you're mourning over all the effort and all the investment. And so it really is a part of you.
yeah,
But I think like that's where the courage part comes in. I talk about courage a lot in different episodes. The courage to take risks, to do the thing that you want to do, to pursue the thing that you want to do, but also the courage to walk away when it's necessary
yeah.
so that there's room for better opportunities, or room for growth.
Yeah. And I think actually the part where it's like, at what point does it become unbearable and you need to sort of stop whatever it is that you're trying to do? I think the moment you have the courage to walk away, that's like the critical first step, because now you're open to new possibilities. You're open to, oh, there might actually be an afterlife. There might actually be some interesting things for me out there. Like I remember when, I mean, I wasn't dead set on giving up academia, but when I transitioned to international education, there was a moment where you had pushed me to apply to international schools and to start thinking about. It felt like recycling myself as a high school teacher, but then I remember thinking to myself, like, "Oh, wait a minute! You mean to tell me like I can make money off of doing the sort of the thing that I'm already like very passionate about, but it's like it's a slightly different audience. It's a very different audience and a very different emphasis." And I feel like the second I accepted that I needed to walk away for monetary reasons, logistical reasons, it was peak COVID. But the second I had gained that courage to step away, that's when I gained this clarity about,
Mm.
okay, this alternative might actually make sense, or it might actually be worthwhile to repurpose myself through this role or through this job.
Yeah. So just to loop back to what you said at the very beginning, you talk about anxiety. Why do we have
Mm,
anxiety? Right. I think the anxiety ultimately is the desire to control
yeah,
what is outside of your control.
yeah,
Because you know that you're unsure what's going to happen,
mm,
but you want ultimate control
yeah,
over what you're unsure what's going to happen. So I think that's what causes a lot of anxiety. And so bringing back to what we talk about a lot is how can we focus on what is within our control?
yeah,
Well, using Dr. Ellis's REBT method is one way.
It is.
And I think like we've mentioned this a couple times throughout this episode, but taking the time to have a little soul searching to be like, what are my values? What are my core values?
Yeah.
And building that belief so that I'm willing to take risks.
Yeah.
And then not being afraid to walk away when, you talk about the ultimate fear of failure is death, right? You're just like, I might as well be
Mm.
dead.
Yeah.
Well, you're kind of already are if you continue to single mindedly masturbating this thing.
Yeah.
You're essentially running into a dead end. Whatever horse you're riding on
Yeah.
is probably dead by
It's
now.
a small
And
horse,
then
like a
it's
little
just
pony.
tiny, like, miniature pony. Oh, I don't want that to be dead. They're so cute. Anyway, so you're kind of beating this dead old horse, trying
Mm.
to be like, come on.
Yeah, no, holding on to that anxiety is it, it's sort of like you don't realize that you actually you're beating a dead horse and you're like, wait a minute, I can still walk. I could still
Sorry,
I
horse.
still have my and
Oh.
then you walk to the nearest first aid station for horses, if that's even a thing. Then you I
And
think
then
you
you come back and save the horse because they're so cute.
I know. I think
The
it's
poor
called a
thing.
vet, first aid for animals. But I think, going back to anxiety, how do we manage anxiety? Well, we think about not outcomes
Mm,
and how to control outcomes. We
mhm,
think about how we will manage our feelings and our emotions, whether we succeed or we fail. It's
mhm,
really about, okay, I can prepare, I can do my utmost best in the moment, but how I respond to outcomes is really the only thing that is genuinely within my control. Because
mm,
at the end of the day, you can walk into a room, people could be like looking at you in all sorts of different ways.
mhm,
If you think I must perform perfectly, people must like me. If I make a mistake, it's going to be awful. If you enter with that expectation, but things, if they don't go your way, you're going to crumble.
mm,
And so, sure, it's important, best practices in communication to prepare, to do all of the things that we want to do to sound confident and calm and everything like that. But training your mind to be receptive to failure, receptive to uh, failure being a necessary part of your journey as a person. And I think it also like one crucial thing about REBT, it's not just about unconditional self acceptance, it's also unconditional other acceptance.
mm,
No one owes you an applause or acceptance of your message or praise.
mm.
If you're okay with people not having the reaction you want them to have
Yeah.
to your wants and needs, you're trying to liberate yourself from others.
Well, I think, yeah, you're talking about that, how do we decrease anxiety? Well, it comes from focusing on what we can control. And we can't control how other people respond to us.
Exactly.
And so while I always tell my students when I was teaching drama, I say, the stage is earned and it's not given.
Mm,
So you want people's attention, you want their applause. Well, you got to do your part
mm,
by controlling what you can control, by making sure you prepare to the best of your abilities, you do the best on stage and you give it your all. And everything else after that, that is out of your control and you
exactly.
can't feel bad that people didn't give you a thunderous applause or a
Exactly.
standing ovation and things like that. Because when you focus on that, that's where your anxiety spirals.
Yeah.
And so that's the same across many different domains in
Yeah.
life is that don't focus your attention on how other people will perceive you, how they will react, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
But just focus on you doing the absolute best quality work and effort that you can.
No, absolutely. And I think it's, by freeing yourself from, well, I want others to react a certain way, because if they don't, then what are they? Are they bad people? How are we going to judge them and label them? So you have unconditional value and others have unconditional value as
That's
well.
right.
And they're free to react however they want to react.
Yeah.
And I think that we are all sort of connected here as human beings by our shared nature of being perpetually anxious
Hmm.
about every
Yep.
little thing that happens to us. And if we give ourselves a lot of grace about how we handle failure and setbacks, I think it makes us more compassionate. And then we see people in a different light as well.
That's right.
Um, so I think that REBT is a helpful framework. It's not the only framework, but it's a helpful framework for, I think, priming the mind for, like I said, acceptance that failure is a necessary part of becoming a more competent speaker, a more competent human.
Even if you're not competent yet in
Mm,
the moment,
yeah,
know that you now have data to work on it.
exactly.
Yeah. And then you will eventually become competent in that area or a completely new area
Yeah,
because now you're willing to look at the world a different way and explore
correct.
different opportunities.
Absolutely.
So yeah, like if you're more interested in Dr. Ellis's book, it's what's the title of the book again?
The book is How to Control Your Anxiety
Mm,
by Dr. Albert Ellis. It's one of many, many, many different books that he's published. He has work going all the way back to like the 1950s, right? So, yeah, it's a wonderful book, and I think that, and there's actually a lot of bits and pieces of that book that relate to performance anxiety,
mm,
perfectionism anxiety, public speaking anxiety. I can invoke, 100 different examples of people struggling with any kind of anxiety, but fundamentally the core lessons, the ABCDs. Adversity leads to us worrying about the consequences, but focus on the belief. It's not about musting and it's not about things have to go your way. It'd be preferable if they went in a positive way, but ultimately it's not the end of the world. And also you can use the disputation. If you feel like your failures and your setbacks are going to be so horrifying and so life ending, use the right?
mm.
Wait a minute. Is this really bad? Is this really the only relationship I'll ever have? Is this really the only public speaking occasion I'll ever partake in? Right? Am I really that unworthy or awful if I don't pull this off? So the ABCDs of anxiety, great framework, very applicable to communication
Yeah,
in all
that's
of its
right.
facets.
Yeah. So that's all that we have for today. And hopefully you'll go check out the book. But most importantly, that you will download our episode. So next time, we're going to talk about the value forward framework where we talk about how do you find your inherent values? How do you find your
Yeah.
core values?
Yeah.
So we'll look into that. See you in the next episode. Have a good one. Bye.